Imagine expanding your team's abilities without adding headcount. With Element 451, AI assistants like admissions advisors and student success coaches work alongside your staff to deliver personalized experiences at scale, offer round the clock support, and uncover data driven insights. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing it smarter. Elevate your team with an AI workforce that delivers personalized, scalable, and impactful experiences across the student lifecycle. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
All right, everybody, we are here, day one of South by Southwest EDU, sitting in the press suite with our interview here. The first one, if you're following along, we'll have a bunch of great conversations coming from this conference throughout the whole week, but I'm really pleased to be having her return to the show. We talked virtually before. I'm here in person, meeting for the first time, which is very great for me. Very excited to have Dr. Bridget Burns from the University Innovation Alliance here in person for a quick conversation for the Hired Geek Podcast. So if folks aren't aware, I feel like you're probably like here as like a celebrity, you know, because I feel like I know you so well. They're just like, oh my God, you probably can even like walk around when you're here.
Only in my mind.
In case folks don't know though, can you give sort of the brief overview elevator pitch of the University Innovation Alliance?
Yeah, so I have the privilege of sitting in between institutions who happen to be the most innovative universities in the country who are deciding to actually work together to try and implement data-based interventions and innovations to improve student outcomes. But like for the layperson, how I would describe my work is I help suspend reality and help universities pretend they don't compete so that they can actually work together on the big things they have in common, which turns out are a lot. They have the same problems in terms of our design, in the fact that we historically have failed a lot of the same students, and it's actually really difficult to drive systemic change and redesign your institution if you're going it alone. And so that's essentially what we do is we run like a national laboratory for student success innovation, and we're trying to not just change our institutions, but actually galvanize the rest of the sector by giving away everything we learn so that it's actually possible that the future will be different and that students will have better outcomes as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really important work. And I mean, just observing from afar and really appreciating what you do. It's great to have you here. And you had a session earlier, Future-Proofing America, building a strategy for talent. I was there. It was a really cool session. And kind of to your point, that idea of like trying to have people feel like we're on the same team, you know, like, especially if it's like, you know, public state systems of education, how can we find sort of like, you know, kind of reach greater heights together and sort of like, you know, support each other and find innovative ways to do that. But I'm curious, I guess, just, you know, that was earlier today, your reflections from the session, like what did you most appreciate about it? What did you wish you had time to get to? Like, just what are your reflections on that?
Well, I think that it was so fabulous to, hear from the audience and to hear from Ruth Watkins from Strata Education Foundation, who was the partner. And I would say what we wanted to try and talk about is how we actually need a strategy. I laid it out that basically we have workforce shortages, we have skills gaps, and I think about the fact that a genius can be born anywhere in any kind of family. And I think about my own experience and others where it's like a near miss that I ended up where I am, and I'm sure you feel the same way. For me, I think the role of colleges and universities is they activate talent. And I'm worried that there's really not a strategy to make sure that we can actually bring forth in society everyone's talent. And I think that there are people who are born who knows where that have the unique ability to solve the big challenge facing all of us. So we should all feel this responsibility to make it so that, more people can achieve their full potential in life. And I think that's what college and universities do. I think that the disconnect is, depends on what you're looking at. But for me, it's that, there's not really a way to think about just the demographics of a state, the natural resources, the industries, and see what needs to be filled in. And then there's completely separate from that is how we make decisions about what we offer and the pathways that exist and how we're going to fill those things in. I just think that our only current strategy is hope. That we hope that the right things happen. We hope the right number of people get in the right pipeline to try and become a doctor, try and become a teacher, try and become a plumber. And I'm just really worried that at 2050, how many do we need? What if we actually had the time and intentionality to plan for that and to set up our systems and our pathways and the supports so that in 2050 we felt like we weren't running into all these friction points. So we talked about that. We talked about how, that's a fairly universal concern. And I don't think that K-12 is going to solve it. I don't think higher ed is going to solve it. I don't think workforce is going to solve it. I don't think any one group is. We got to find a way to work together because I don't have kids, but if I did, I would be very concerned that there is no strategy to connect talent and opportunity in the future. And AI is only going to make things more complicated. So we talked about that, but I swear it was more hopeful. There were actually solutions.
Yes, it was, I think, a galvanizing session in the sense of you have to obviously understand the problem to be able to solve it appropriately. And I think, I was even feeling well, that feels like a call to action, that idea of oh, there's going to be these shortages and these really core industries and everything. And in my mind too, I think there might be this sort of resistance, I guess, is sort of a brief follow-up of sort of inception, you acknowledge that you're in a dream kind of thing, where it's just if we just acknowledge the problem of we need more teachers, we need more plumbers. And if there are, billboards out there and whatever else, just being help us respond to this need in your community, come here, study with us, we will support you. And trying to make that very known to people that there's a demand for this, that I don't know, I guess I'm just curious if that's part of where we're at, is we need to make it known to people who maybe that idea of hey, I'm unhappy with my job. It doesn't feel gainfully employing enough. It's well, you know what, if you were to go down this path, is in, a high demand field, and certainly with a lot of those things, I think would be fairly secure, where it's just we need plumbers, we need doctors, we need these things. So what's your thought on that idea of at least we collectively need to really make public this problem of shortages in core industries, and have institutions try to do that to then position themselves of and we're here to help you meet that need, people in the community.
I think I worry about, so immediately I want to answer your question, but I also am realistic about the capacity of this moment and how people are really in a moment of tremendous scarcity and fear. But what you're saying there just helps me clarify what I think the actual issue is, that, in the work that I do, I'm always asking who's in charge of student success? And people say things oh, it's everybody's job. Well, then it's no one's job. Mm-hmm. And so I would use the same allegory that whose job is it to protect the future? Well, it's everyone's job. Well, it's no one's job. And so that's the problem, is that there is not an entity that is actually thinking about, I know there are lots of futurists out there, and there are lots of people who are doing some very creative work. But when we're talking about the people who actually create solutions, and we actually need bought in to be part of the solution, they are too busy playing defense to do offense as well. And so we have to create different spaces where people can come together. And I don't think that it can be, we're going to now form a cluster of blah, 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 that we're going to work on, the future of teaching. And we're going to totally isolate it. Just think about that all the time. I think that you have to create sprint-like experiences where sector entities come together to try and actually address and, pitch and catch ideas and actually prototype rapidly and come up with some solutions. And we have to do it in a dose that is sustainable. But right now I really do think about this. I'm man, AI, energy production issue, we need so much more energy now to fuel AI. And it turns out that most people are thinking about, if you think about where resources are going to be, they're thinking about nuclear. And the problem is, if you look at nuclear, the average age of a nuclear engineer is dangerously close to retirement because it's gone through a terrible reputation for a long time. And so people didn't go into nuclear. And also the highest producing institutions that produce nuclear engineers, I mean, we're talking like 20 a year, right? It's actually, and so we have we have existing infrastructure. We have nuclear reactors all over this country. They're aging. We don't have enough people to actually take care of them. Whose job? Whose job is it? Well, frankly, it's my job. It's your job. It's everybody's job. Like, I think this is part of it, is like the future should pull forth from us a sense of interdependence and how much we all do need to cooperatively pull together to try and figure it out. And I just think that higher ed, this is something that we can uniquely bring skill to the table. I think that there are countless faculty at every institution in my organization, but so many other, every institution, who are working on things that are about 2050 for their state. And we need to start creating spaces for those people to come together, like a home plate, to just think about what are the policy decisions today that we'd be so proud of ourselves in 2050. Because like I ended the session with this is something not from me, Michael Crow said, like 2050 is as close to today as the year 2000. And so that for me has been like the chilling data point that I'm just like, I keep thinking about, and I'm like, man, we gotta create different spaces, and we gotta reinforce the drumbeat that we gotta pull together, because our mutual like interdependence demands it, and we're all battening the hatches and playing defense right now. But the only way that we're like, you call it equity gaps, call it whatever you want. This is about making it so that talent and opportunity finally align. That, you know, people say, you know, talent's equally distributed, opportunity not. I always hear that. I always hear it stated all the time. And then people use that as like their buzzword or their line to explain their nonprofit. Mm. Love it. I believe in that, right? But what if we actually just tried to solve that? That's the thing. And too many of us are working on a tiny piece of it. But we need to create a collective tent that we all come together and like actually work on it.
Absolutely. And it feels like it's something that would fit more naturally within, like, I guess, like in the US, where like states control so much of like what happens in education or workforce development or whatever. Like, so the idea of you could maybe as like a governor of a state or something, like convene those people, provide a target, you know, particular industries or different things. And like you said, it's like kind of make it people's responsibility, give them like, you know, sprints and targets and goals and very specific things. And I feel like that does get closer to the idea of future proofing and, you know, building that alignment to where like you were saying, like this sort of like, you know, kind of, I'm forgetting the exact phrasing you said, but like sort of that like, you know, just hope and pray approach kind of thing, where it's just like, I don't know, everything seems to work out in the end, like whatever. It's just like, yeah, I mean, usually because like people make that so. They make the future that they want, that, you know, they want people to have like gainful employment and type of, you know, careers and jobs and things that we need. And I think, yeah, I mean, that's like a one that I think has really cropped up so recently, is the like, we need more energy and we need it quickly. Like that's one big area, but then it's that idea of like, man, yeah, I guess like we need more teachers still and doctors and everything, like the things that we've had for so long. It's just like, we still just need to keep creating a steady pipeline of qualified people. And part of what I think about too, that I've seen, is like the idea of, in certain fields, it's the idea of like, well, can we have it so that like, you know, it doesn't require like, you know, a full doctor, you know, being a doctor in a hospital doesn't require you to get, you know, years and years of schooling. You can then become like a physician's assistant or like some other thing, like start to kind of like break it down so that we can like start getting people to support the work of doctors or whatever else, or support the work of teachers or, you know, whatever else, like start thinking creatively about how we sort of, you know, break down credentials to not just be like, well, you need that one thing if you want to do that one job and it might take, you know, however long. It's like you can get started and get in there and start making an impact, creating more, you know, capacity in our hospitals and, you know, whatever else. But
it's interesting, like, I feel like I'm in a lot of conversations, and I like here at South by, it's like I come partially because it puts me in a lot of weird spaces that are not the normal space I'm in, right? I need to hear from K-12 more. I need to hear from different nonprofit folks who I've never met. I need to hear their theory of change. I need to hear what they're wrestling with, because it helps me think differently about my work. And it's just kind of like a chance to kind of, you know, just a little outside thinking, a little bit more empathy, a little bit more, oh, maybe I hadn't thought about that, right? But I do feel like humanity is still at its core good, and we want to do good in the world. And I'm consistently in these spaces where I hear someone say, someone should work on that. And I'm just, and my job is to just kind of stand in the center and notice the consistent drumbeat of conversations. And I'm like, well, if not you, then who, right? And so we have to start organizing ourselves around these grand challenges. We know that teaching post 2020, if you think that K-12 is going to fix that, or that it's their job to fix that, when they are dealing with a crisis of cell phone addiction and mental health and truancy and all these other issues that have really like 10x'd, and you think that teachers are going to somehow fix the teaching profession so that no, that's why I like spaces where I see people solving problems collectively, but also for other groups. Like there's a dean at the Mary Lou Fulton. I think they now have rebranded their college for like the center, like learning innovation.
Right.
And basically reimagining these issues and thinking about the challenges facing the teaching profession as a workforce issue, and thinking about the workforce instead of just lumping in all the K-12's challenges together. And then, oh, by the way, also attrition of teachers, like someone should fix that. So the idea is essentially, if you, it used to be one teacher for every 25 students, she instead reimagines it as it's 4 teachers are going to work into each of their unique skill sets for 100 students. So one who's a fantastic lecturer, you might have a classroom of 100 students. Others who are really great at coaching or who are great at team-based learning or different types of modalities of learning, you get to actually kind of play into your zone of genius, and the learning outcomes are dramatically better. Like, I know just enough to be dangerous about that solution, but what I love is someone taking responsibility for a problem and trying to fix it. And it at no point did someone wake up and say, Carol Basile, this is your job. Like, all these problems about the workforce in the future, like, no one's going to say to us, like, this is your job to solve, Dustin. Mm. So we have to create spaces where, like, you and I are both freaked out about this. What big problem needs to have some community brought to it, and then how do we organize ourselves in a way that will actually try and solve these problems together?
Yeah, that is a really interesting example, and I'm sure other folks will probably be kind of noodling on how it might correlate to like what they do of like that sort of approach of like, okay, well, if we maybe have like, because it could even be where it's like we have a shortage of teachers as we've traditionally defined them. But the idea of it's like, well, if we have a team of 4 and they have different skill sets, we could recruit differently and like train them and do whatever. Like, it would just reshape your whole notion of like, recruiting a teacher. What does that look like? What do they do? And it could be where it's like, well, actually, I mean, like, you have a teacher, quote unquote, in the room, but they're actually like credentialed as like maybe a paraprofessional, but they're doing all the like tech stuff or back end and support and communication and whatever else. And yeah, you've got like the person who has like a 4-year or master's degree in teaching, lecturing, and doing all that sort of stuff, and they can like focus there. And it's like, well, yeah, we've got the students we've got, and it might feel like we're really busting at the seams in terms of like the ratios, but then it's like, I don't know, let's kind of shake this up and remix it, and then you might feel like you have a healthier, steadier pipeline of teachers. And it's like kind of the same thing I was thinking of just sort of like,
totally it's helping with burnout. You should totally have her on. She's fantastic. She's really, really, and she testified in Congress, was part of. She told me about it in advance, but then if you watch her congressional testimony, it was like, it's so perfect, because for me, I'm always trying to learn from other sectors. I'm like, why have we not? Like, if she's working on this for K-12, then think about a university and think about we think about classes, and you have a faculty member or you have a teacher or an instructor for whatever the size of the class is. Could we reimagine our workforce differently? Because we're trying to address this burnout, because that's one of the things is if it's 4 for 100, one of them can actually be doing professional development and addressing like growth, and you can actually make this something that people enjoy this profession again, because it's the most important profession. Like, it connects to every other. Like, I can't talk to you about engineers or plumbers or anything else. We don't fix this one. And I don't think it's fair to expect K-12 to solve this challenge. They did not create it.
Yeah.
Like, social media, COVID, our short attention spans, phone addiction, all of these things that are compounding, it is not the fault of K-12, and therefore it cannot be K-12's responsibility to fix it. But we should also learn from the experience and try and use that for inspiration to fix our own problems, because our yard's got some problems.
Yeah. And like similar things as well, just the idea of like attention spans and like different, it's like, so there's some more direct correlations, but even just sort of the notion of like the thinking creatively, thinking innovatively, because like I'm sure in some instances it's like something like that might require like some policy changes or like some leeway of just being like, please, it's okay, you can feel like you're stepping outside the bounds a little bit here, and that's okay. And having that come from folks like at the top, because I feel like in higher ed, with accreditors or others, things like that, I think we're starting to see it a little bit with like 3-year bachelors and that kind of thing, where it's just like you're allowed to look into this and like maybe start some experiments or whatever.
I like the experimentation stuff, but to go back to kind of the premise of what we've been talking about, like there's a crisis right now. Whenever you're listening to this podcast, this is March of 2025. Things are challenging, and people are freaking out, and I don't find that people are often doing their best work when they live in scarcity and fear. But we also have to look at the long view of history, and that if you think about any major challenge that's been solved or major innovation, it is usually connected to a real pressing problem. So right now, we have these workforce shortage issues. We need more engineers. We need more doctors. Okay, great. If you think that we're going to change the engineering curriculum just because we want to, no, we aren't. But because we have the strong fear now about the lack of engineers, and we worry about the aging infrastructure in the United States, and we actually need to win when it comes to economic competitiveness in big ways that are going to require that kind of particular skills. That fear will probably drive us to finally make changes to the ways that we think about how we educate a person, and some of the basic bureaucratic challenges that we always will say, no, you can't do that. You can't do that because whatever reason, right? The faculty won't let you, or the accreditor won't let you. Right? It's only because things are going to get so spicy and difficult, and we're so afraid, that we're going to actually force through some of these big changes. So I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but I do think we sometimes don't understand that none of the big things that we, looking back, are grateful they exist, came because the circumstances were calm. Like the seas right now, I keep going back to this analogy from Michael Crow, because people are, looking for leadership right now, and it's very scary and spicy. I don't know if spicy is the right word. Sorry.
I think so.
It's been a long day, but his point is that, you're sailing, and right now it is like gale force winds. The boat is moving really rocky, and you don't even know up is down, right? But it's still sailing, okay? And there have been times where it's been completely peaceful and calm, and you've been kind of a little sleepy. It's still sailing. We have to remember that the work that we have to do on a daily basis is actually still the same work. It's just the conditions are more difficult. And so it's helpful to remember that at the end of the day, my job is still my job. My skills I need to bring to the table are still the skills. The circumstances, but focus on that. Focus on executing on what you're good at, on what you're actually supposed to do. Try not to be too distracted when it feels like the world's on fire. Focus on it's just sailing. It's get back to those basics, and that's how I've been calling myself, is to think about the core element of our work that we have to keep doing no matter what the headlines say.
Yeah. Well, I guess, the spiciness to me is it's giving you agita, it's giving you heartburn kind of thing. Cause it's oh, I like spicy. I don't know, but some people do like spicy. I mean, that's that's definitely what I wanted to get your perspective on. So I'm glad you kind of just were taking us through this event, and sort of what it's giving you, and, the turbulence and kind of, choppy waters where it is sometimes. Yeah. It's you got to lean into it a little bit. You can't just drop anchor and kind of give up to despair or whatever else. Is you have to choose to believe in what could be, and hope and everything, and keep moving forward. And I think that is a very apt metaphor that you shared. And I think obviously we're seeing it kind of filter through a lot here in terms of a general topic. So I want to, before we kind of jump off here, get your kind of quick takes on AI, sort of a influential sort of topic here. And the way I framed a question in my head was sort of from your perspective, AI as a enabler of efficiency and effectiveness and everything else. And I guess just, your perspective on, how to do that, how to leverage AI as a enabler of efficiency and effectiveness in higher ed. I mean,
I use it. My worry is, I don't know if you're having this where you feel like you're afraid of getting dumber because you're so dependent, but I'm so greatly optimized by my reliance on AI right now. But I think that what we have to be doing right now is finding ways to pull together, to think of creative applications of AI to help actually, from a pedagogically sound perspective, make it so that students are more creative. I think that's the part that I'm like thinking about is there's a lot of like energy around AI where people are freaking out like, oh, it's going to disrupt. Listen, change is change. Change was going to come. There's going to be some good, some bad. But what I'm interested in is we are often freaking out about change because we're somehow buying into the assumption that the status quo was good or that it was, we're like protective of it. And it's like, let's just like lean into the fact that I don't know that every classroom experience was always the most pedagogically, instructionally designed, like perfect. And so is there a possible future in which we could come up with a instructional design method that students are asked to use all different types of AI, but in a very specific way that actually makes them be more creative in their application of it? I don't think any one institution will figure that out, but I think I'm always looking for challenges that I think transcend like individual institutions. I think that's really an interesting question because I'm finding that I worry about getting dumber by using GPT in the same ways, right? But I actually think I'm becoming a much better writing partner. I'm becoming better at thinking creatively about problems and how I actually design some of our work because of the way that I'm using GPT, whereas I was always kind of staying at a lower altitude, doing the grunt work of the actual like every single word writing. I'm trying to lean into the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And but otherwise, I think that we should be very worried that it's changing what skills are required for jobs, and it is it's going to impact us in a multitude of ways, and I don't think that we are creating enough rooms or tents or spaces for different types of teachers. I worry about the disciplines actually getting space together to I think we talked about like the legal profession. Is there going to be a paralegal in the future? Yes, probably. That's a vital job, but now we've helped them skill up. And so what is the basic menial tasks that a paralegal used to do that now what are they capable of doing that we never gave them the chance to do, right? That's a way of looking at AI in a different way instead of being like, oh my God, we're going to lose our job. Okay, yes, some of the stuff that could have been executed by a machine are going to be executed by a machine. So therefore, what is the unique higher calling that a human, we didn't even know they had the potential to do?
Right.
And how do we set them up for that? I think we need to have as many spaces for every discipline for that kind of conversation.
Well, that's what I think. Like the complicating thing for higher ed is that like it is impacting us in our day to day of just sort of like what we do, and we can be more impactful with like. Sometimes it's like, oh, if we're doing a thing, we just sort of have the template. We're just copying the template. We tinker with it. It's like, oh, you could like use, ChatGPT or whatever else to like give you some inspiration of like how you sort of present a syllabus or a lesson plan, like this, that, the other, or just like how you just do anything for your work. Because I do a lot for like titles for podcast episodes. Because I'm like, I've been doing this for a very long time. I can't come up with like more creative podcast episode titles, but like, so like there's that. But then the idea of like, okay, well, we have our school of law and different things, like teaching lawyers and whatever else. Like we have to understand like how it's impacting us in our day to day, and then also all the disciplines that we train and educate people in, and be sort of keeping your eye on that ball of like making sort of acknowledgments of like, yeah, well, like what could paralegals do in the future if like menial tasks are sort of offloaded to AI, and look at that as a opportunity versus like, solely as a, danger and threat. Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that it's actually some of the tasks I'm offloading are not things I was ever good at. They're things I was pretty mediocre to terrible. I don't know if you are great at marketing, but you're handing off marketing, right? And many people because I use it for the same thing where I'll be like, give me 5 headlines based on this and act as a marketing expert. And then I'll pick one and then I'll wordsmith it and I'll shoot it back and give me 5 more, right? I was so bad. If you look at my headline, it's not like, yes, I'm delegating that task. I'm not giving away something I was good at or that I should be doing. I'm delegating things I frankly shouldn't have been doing and I haven't. It's for the best of humanity that I not be writing the titles of podcast episodes, right? I think that's a really interesting kind of reframing of it. Because there is like, change makes people always feel some degree of uncertainty, unless it was your idea. People always are like but we're like turning our brains off for a second and completely forgetting that it wasn't great. It wasn't as good as we think it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And almost like that a lot of people kind of are like obsessed with keeping their hand on the wheel all the time kind of thing. And that's even, I guess, another apt metaphor of just like self-driving cars or whatever. But like, it's the idea of like, I need to be in control of everything. It's like, but what if you like, we're good at that thing? Like, would it be nice to you just, delegate it or whatever? It's like, no, I got to do all of it. But so, yeah, I think we're, in an interesting moment with that. I think, there's obviously a lot of folks here talking about it. There's increasingly a lot of great resources out there to help people navigate this. And I think we're starting to see, and why I feel like for me, I've been sort of like dipping my toe in the water with like episodes on the podcast here is like trying to find tangible examples of how people are like, integrating AI into curriculum, even in like non-technical fields, like kind of to what we're talking about. And then, specific tools that people are using in their work versus like just sort of the existential, nature of like AI or whatever. So, yeah.
My favorite, and I wish people would do this, if you're ever holding an event, dear God, please, whatever agenda you came up with, put it in there and ask it to act as an instructional designer and ask it to generate an alternative approach that is using active learning. We are wasting people's time by creating experiences that frankly suck and don't actually help them to learn. Whether it's a conference, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a class, and that is one skill set that we all need more of. And like, that is the easiest use of it, that it just always comes up with a better approach. Like I just did that, by the way, for this session. I came up with a guide because I was asking for it to come up with active learning questions that we could put on Mentimeter for the audience. Like, you don't need me tilting at that windmill by myself. No, like...
Or just like, taking twice as long where it's just like, oh, I'm going to like bang my head against the wall for like an hour or something, where it's just like, it could give you something to start with. Exactly. That's always my advice, is like, use it as the starting point, because like the blank page is just like torture, I think, for a lot of people, where it's just like, yeah, it could be anything. You could ask whatever you want. You could do whatever, this podcast episode could be titled whatever you want, And so like, give me 5 samples and I'm going to be like, I want more of this, less of that. And like, and even the idea of like, creating like a custom GPT to use, sort of that vernacular, like, on ChatGPT, being able to like, I'm going to load you in like all my podcast episodes I've ever done, or like whatever else, or like, here's some of my writing. Like, you can get it to feel a lot like you and be using it very strategically when it's like, oh, I am having a problem with this, I need some support, or, oh, I do need to get this done, I need it done in, a fraction of the time. It's like, it's there for you. It's a tool. Like, let's leverage it and be, open-minded about sort of playing around with it and seeing what it can give, and it's only going to get better all the time. But I think we'll leave it there. Always great talking to you. Appreciate all that you do, and you being kind of part of this event, which I love. So we'll have ways to connect with you and your work in the show notes. But just thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Thanks for having me. This was it's really great to be able to get a chance to do an episode in the midst of all of this going on. And I feel like South by is a unique experience. And if you don't reflect on it while you're in it, you just kind of like leave and you're kind of like, what just happened?
Yeah, your brain is just jello.
But it is good to be able to expose yourself to thinking about different sectors. And we do spend way too much space and time in higher ed, only talking to higher ed people. So if you come to South by, yes, it's very K-12 heavy, but you got to come because we cannot have the silo that exists right now between, and there aren't enough spaces where higher ed and K-12 show up together that are around creating the change that's needed for students. Like, I mean, so that's the one feedback I always get from higher ed people is like, it's so K-12. And I'm like, yeah, dude, if you think that we are going to get to where we need to go by only talking to other higher ed people, then you are completely wrong. Like, we need to be listening more. And so come hang out. It'll be weird, but you need to be around more weird stuff to actually help you think outside the box.
Beautiful place to end it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.